We should be good to go.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to the Node.js Foundation Technical Steering Committee meeting for October 11th, 2017. So far we have with us Rod, myself, Michael, Francisca, Matteo, Miles, Joy, and as a guest appearance, Gibson to give us an update on the release working group. So moving on to the standard agenda. First of all, does anybody have any announcements?
Sorry, I might have said something wrong. It might not be working. Sorry.
I couldn't quite catch that, Matteo.
I don't know if it's working. Just give me a second.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I did it. Sorry, let me just. No, I see we are good.
Just a second ago, Matteo.
I think we are good. Can you please verify? We should be good. Sorry for not knowing what I'm doing, but I'm just trying to make it good.
Matteo, I can confirm I just checked again. The live feed appears to be streaming just fine.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, perfect. Awesome.
Okay. So any announcements? Okay, sounds like not. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is workgroup update. And today we have Gibson from the release workgroup to give us a short update on what's going on there. Gibson?
Okay, yep. Everyone can hear me, I hope?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
So obviously we have several other members of release here, Miles and pretty sure Rod's in release, and Michael. So feel free to step in if I miss anything. But basically, major work recently was actually the formation of the release working group and the organization of all that, which Michael was the main driving force behind and which landed a few weeks ago. There's still a few things to clean up as a result of that, sort of making sure the teams match like GitHub organizations and that everything adds up. And we are now going to have a releases team, or that is planned. So that could mean some changes to how we do things. But other than that, things have mostly been continuing as normal. We got a v6.x minor coming up very soon. I think the RC is out now. So just going through everything for that. And I don't think there's anything too controversial. So mostly I think Miles just been getting that out and then preparing for Node 8. So I need to work out how to do releases, and I think Miles will be walking me through that and getting that set up in time for Node 8 LTS. I'm not sure there's anything else particularly. I guess, so Michael, you're a bit clacky. There we go. The other thing has been about trying to make it easier for more people to get involved with the backporting and sort of expand, make it so it's not just Miles and not just one person, doing the brunt of the work, so we can actually share it better. I think is a key objective at the moment. Yeah, that's it.
So also, are there any then questions for Gibson in terms of the releases or concerns or anything else to discuss on that front?
I guess the other main question that's being discussed at the moment is the V8 updates, but that's kind of a wider, that's already being discussed by the TSC. So.
Right. Yeah, I think as I remember it, the last decision, or the way the decision kind of ended, is 6.2 was likely too close for 6.2 for the LTS release itself, but work was ongoing to see if it could be made compatible as a potential for it going in after LTS goes out.
Yeah, to just add to that, there's been, some more information since the last time we discussed. But I guess that just raises the question quickly before we dig into anything, because we don't have a quorum. Should we be digging into the various agenda items that we have right now? or should we wait until the next meeting?
I think we should go through the items and see what business we can do. Obviously, we don't have quorum to make a final decision, but it's probably, since we took the time to get together, it was probably good to go through to see what we can do if there is anything on each of them.
And there's a lot of votes on a bunch of them already, so we may end up having enough.
Yeah, if we actually just need a few more people or something like that. Okay, so I'm just going to take that last note on. So last discussion was... Okay, so thanks Gibson for that update, and we'll look forward to, I'll figure out who we can invite next time for our working group update as well. So moving on to the agenda items that were extracted from the repo. The first one is 873 in the build working group, which is this one, and it was Miles, I believe, who put that on the agenda. So if you want to talk to that.
Yeah, before we get into that, Michael, just because the 6.1, 6.2 thing was brought up by Gibson, I'm not seeing it on the agenda right now. Can we just talk about the 8.7.0 release in V8 quickly before we get into the build stuff?
Sure.
So I just want to give everyone a quick update and get some guidance on what we should do. We could probably wait until a little bit later in the day to make a decision in case some more people can chime in. Hey, Trevor, thanks for joining. So as it is right now, 8.7 has been updated to 6.1. And the version of 6.1 that we've taken in ahead of 6.1 does have escape analysis turned off. And Matteo can talk to the performance changes that we've seen with escape analysis, but this is due to security vulnerability in V8. There's debate about whether or not our security if it's a security vulnerability in Node or not, but one of the bigger issues to keep in mind is that this version of escape analysis that exists on 6.1 and lower is buggy and has this one vulnerability, and for the future will no longer be maintained by V8. So if there are other vulnerabilities and other bugs, those are never patched. So the general advice and thought process on it is that escape analysis on any branch lower than 6.2 should just be turned off. And there's no way to cherry pick the new escape analysis implementation. So we kind of have a couple different questions. One of them is, for right now, if we should be even shipping 8.7 with 6.1, I don't think it makes a difference because for either 6.1 or 6.0, we should be right now turning escape analysis off if that's what we're going to do. The other question is if we should temporarily re-enable it until we have a conclusion on what to do otherwise, because if we re-enable it, we won't have the performance problems, but because we don't have consensus on whether or not there's a security problem there, and because of the ongoing problems, it looks like we should disable it. And then either way, it raises the question about 6.2 and whether or not we should consider it for the branch. 6.2 is stabilizing right now. The pull request that we have for it only has a single failure on AIX now, so it's very close to being able to land. And once we are able to land that on master, Anna was going to start doing the work for comparison ABI compat. So I guess kind of like the question for today is, should 8.7 be released with escape analysis turned off? And I'll just kind of leave it to the floor to get a pulse as to what people think about it on the call.
It seems to me that if the recommendation that it not be used, and if we're not, it sounds like we might temporarily fix any performance problems, but if we're going to revert that later, I don't know if turning it on makes sense. I guess that's the key question. Like, if we turned it on, are we comfortable shipping with it on for LTS?
I'm personally very uncomfortable with leaving it on in LTS.
And in terms of the performance issues, I think I asked this before, is it that we've regressed versus what it could be, or have we regressed versus what it was before we took the turbofan pipeline?
We regress against what we could be, not against what we were. Like, it restores a previous situation.
Right. So I guess, given, if we have in my opinion, then a lot of the people talk is that, if we're not worse than we were in the previous LTS, and the advice is that it's safer to turn it off, that's what I would think is the way to go.
However, in certain cases, like the benefits of escape analysis, it's critical to use some of the new language features, like the structuring and other bits. So I think it might be better to actually maybe ship 6.2 if needed. This is comes from me, at least. It's I would really like to have this in for this LTS cycle.
So with that being said, I'll post in that issue for the pull request one more time with a call to the TSC. The pull request is all ready to go. The change log is up to date, and the build has been done. So like the only thing left to do for the release is to promote it at this point. I will wait, maybe like 6 or 7 hours from now, which gives some people on the West Coast time to wake up and review it. And unless I have any objections, I will ship 8.7.0 today as it is with escape analysis turned off. And we can revisit other questions regarding 6.2, at a later time. We have some time to figure this out. I think one of the things that we had discussed, which I think is worth considering, but we as a committee can revisit this, would be even looking at upgrading the V8 during the LTS cycle, as long, like in a minor, as long as we're able to show that it's stable, that it's not regressing anything, and that it's not going to cause any problems.
Right. And I think, in my opinion, that's better than trying to rush it in. What are we, 2 weeks before, 2 or 3 weeks before we actually declare the LTS?
Yeah, we can land it in 9 as long as we can get that last test fixed in time, and then have it run in 9 for even like a month or two, and then upgrade it. And that seems pretty reasonable to me from an LTS support contract as well. It potentially adds some new language features. Well, I mean, it does add new language features, but that is the December minor contract as long as it's not breaking anything. And we have a history of updating the UV and other dependencies and December minor updates in LTS in the past, just not V8.
So what was that issue number, just so that I can add it into the minutes?
Give me 1 second here, and I'll dig it up for you. It is 15762.
Can you paste the link? Yeah, thanks. And then I can cut and paste. Thanks. Okay.
So, sorry, was there a path to adding this back in 8, or is it's off and it's just shipped off for good in 8? Is that what we're talking about here?
The only path we have to shipping in an 8 is 6.2 right now, as far as I can tell.
Oh, so okay. So as far as V8 is concerned, 6.1 it just has a buggy implementation, and that's fixed in 6.2. Okay.
It's a whole new implementation in 6.2.
Yeah. So okay. Was there an issue where this was discussed in our repo? I mean, I'm seeing the discussion externally, but I'm not seeing the one in ours.
So it was discussed in the.
Just me, or did mine drop out?
Yeah, okay, good. I was wondering the same thing.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, so I just got to dig it up. You know what ended up happening is there's like this pull request for 8.7 is a huge one, so there's a lot of hidden messages right now. Let me dig it up, and I'll post it in the chat once I find it. There's a whole bunch of comments through, but we do have an issue specifically about the escape analysis stuff. But here's the comment where I discussed 3 potential options and asked for some insight. There's a release issue where we've been discussing like just V8 and timing on V8. And then here's the node issue where we discussed it. So for those who are listening, 15.762 is the pull request. And the issue on our release repo is 246, where we've been discussing just the stem-variness of V8 and how we want to manage it for different release lines. And issue 15.564 is the issue on the repo where we've discussed the optimization pipeline for escape analysis being disabled. And then, Rod, feel free to ping me outside this meeting if you have other questions, or just ping it in one of those issues. The V8 team has been pretty responsive as well.
It's all pretty terrible, isn't it? we're kind of we're messed up whatever we choose here, isn't it? But does anyone have any good feel on the performance numbers? Does anyone actually done that? 6.1 with it enabled versus 6.1 with it disabled? Because it seems like that's really our only call here.
Yeah, anyway. Matteo did, and it was like an 8x performance difference for the specific happy paths that escape analysis helped.
Right, destructuring for. So that's the new ES6 features.
Yeah, I think there was stuff, Matteo, I don't know if you're still there, but I think this also affected some of the performance changes. It was either bind or like some specific object related work. I'm grasping at straws for the specific ones, but I remember there were performance improvements Matteo was quite excited about.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, go ahead, Rod.
Oh, no, I was just going back to the discussion before about Anna was going to do some work on some ABI. Was that ABI for 6.2 in 8? Was that for that option?
So yeah, so Anna was pretty confident that we should be able to make 6.2 ABI compatible. We've just been working on getting 6.2 to build, which I did some work over the last 24 hours, and someone from the V8 team got some stuff in. So we now have almost everything green for 6.2 on master. We have a single test failing on AIX. And we're now at the point though where Anna could start doing the ABI work.
That's all good context. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think, my opinion is it's an unfortunate situation, but if we can get some validation on current or whatever, that would make it easier to pull in 6.2, I think, anyway.
Yeah. The one thing that I do think is like at least a decent thing to consider is, the path that we've taken up until now at least offers us an option. And had we been on older versions, we would have just been stuck. So
right, because this has been broken for 2.5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is at the very least, it's been like kind of like an ongoing thing with turbofan ignition that we've been doing. And I think the end result will be we're going to have a far better 8.x experience than we would have had otherwise.
The other question I get, the particular vulnerability, how do we know how that impacts us? Was reported, or there was 2 reported. It was there were out of bounds accesses. Do we know anything about them for us?
So the general analysis from the V8 team was that the security vulnerability is not necessarily something that affects our security profile, unless we're like worrying about. It's like it was for executing unknown code, so it's something that would really only hit people in Node if they're running a val. And the argument was that, potentially for our security profile, that doesn't really matter in the same way, because if you're already avowing random code, it can do a lot worse stuff. But the discussion that I've had with a couple different people, including like Ali, was that it was less about this one security vulnerability that's the problem, and more about like if it's already so bad that they've turned it off. And if there's this one security vulnerability that we know about and it's going to be completely untested for the next 2.5 years, that's the reason to turn it off, not necessarily just this one security vulnerability.
Yeah, no, I get that. I'm just wondering if, when we are asked about this, what that response is. And that makes sense. I like, even if we're not impacted, then so what? It just seems like there's obviously some kind of vector there that maybe could even get bigger if people start poking around at it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. No, I support the decisions going that have been made so far on that. So good work, guys.
So yeah, I just commented in the issue that Miles posted, because it wasn't clear in there that would be the path forward. That basically the discussion here was that we'd go with option 1, so land 6.1 with escape analysis disabled unless there's objections in the thread in the next little while, right? Okay, let's move on to the next issue, which is build issue 873. Miles, you had added that issue, so maybe you want to take that one on.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to preface by saying that the build team does amazing work, and this isn't meant in a negative way. But I just wanted to bring attention to the TSC, kind of an ongoing issue that's been going. Readable stream in Canary in the Gold Mine has been broken for about 9 months now. It initially became broken due to temporary directories being missing in 1604 and Fedora 23. The first issue was opened in March by Matteo, and subsequent issues were opened by myself. It was eventually, there was a patch that was landed in some of the Ansible stuff that should have fixed this on the 11th, but as of right now, it's not clear if those scripts have actually been run. It seems like there may have been, a bit of a understanding in the build group that some of this work could have been done, and there was a bit of a no one has really volunteered here to do this feeling in there. And so this is one of those issues that, at least the way I see it, wouldn't take a ton of time for someone to see through that's familiar, and it's more just about floating these things. And so I'm not convinced right now, for example, that GitHub issues are working as well as they can as a queue for tasks for the build group, especially for prioritization or for things that need to get done. I know that we have other tools that are available in GitHub now, such as projects, and maybe that could be a way to examine it. But I mostly just wanted to kind of like bring this up to the technical steering committee, and I'll bring it up at the build working group as well to just kind of general awareness. Although I guess 50% of the people in the room right now are from the build working groups. So most people may have seen that thread already. But I guess I can leave it to the floor here, and I'm open. If people think that I've kind of jumped the gun and want to say so, but it's mostly, this didn't feel like the kind of thing that should have taken this long, and it seems like maybe a higher level process problem. And I'm just interested in how people think that we can maybe avoid stuff like this happening.
Joining conference now. This conference is being recorded by the organizer.
It's just been alerted, and I feel like that's the most direct way to force people to make sure things work.
So Trevor, just to clarify this is an infrastructure problem, not a commit problem in this particular instance. I guess what was it that 9 months ago changed that is maybe what he's asking? Yeah, I guess that makes sense. It's just that the temp directory on 2 operating systems didn't exist anymore. And we needed to make the
When did we start using this node temp thing? Because that was new to me as well when this started off. Because we've never made that in the past. Why are we suddenly making it now? That's an interesting bit of history there that I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that bit, I'm not sure to be completely fair on it. But I do know that was something that regressed. That happened, at the very least, the test suite, the readable stream on those 2 platforms had been working and regressed. And yeah, just I guess the fact that it remained regressed and it's still regressed for as long as it has, is concerning.
So, my analysis of this situation is, so I think, so your analysis of the simplicity of the fix here, I think, is wrong. That's totally wrong, but it is I don't even, on my setup, whenever I need to go and access machines, I often have to figure out whether I have the SSH config even in the machine. I'm regularly hand-edging the SSH config. I know we have stuff in there to, that you can pull out or answer this out. I don't use that. I haven't been using it so far, unless I might have with some success. So for me, it's like absolutely not a trivial matter of just going in and doing to press other machines. And certainly I'm not at all comfortable running Ansible again across machines that are already set up. I just, and that's it's not a practice we do very often, so I'm not comfortable that that would be side effect free. And also, I wouldn't know how, I don't know how without current Ansible setup to even run that and limit it to just that job. So I do want something like parallel SSH to do that. So anyway, but that's just the point there is that it's not a simple fix of just making this stuff, of going in there across all the machines and doing this, make the, so the work there is should it be easier? Like, and for the sidelines, like it sounds like if we wanted to throw a new box in for another testing, it's like, okay, well, crap, we got some work to do. That's that language stuff is easy. Yeah, actually, Ansible does a very good job of setting up a new one. And when you're setting up a new one, you're less worried about breaking things than, running Ansible across all of our existing machines and potentially breaking it so that it doesn't work at all, right? Like, just a quick look at our inventory now, and this is excluding the Raspberry Pis, but there's 40 out of them.
Joining conference now. This conference organizer.
Why is this now an infrastructure problem? When in the past we've had really simple, we make a build directory and run Jenkins and everything else happens.
So I guess like the one thing that I found particularly odd though is that it's only on those two platforms where it's failing, and somehow that node temp directory is working on the other platforms.
So okay, so we can get into the specific here. I think it's worth going into the history here because I'd love to remove this dependency even from our Ansible, making this directory, because it seems itself to be brittle. Like, let's put it into our setup scripts for Sitcom in Jenkins, or let's put it in Sitcom itself, or something like that, where it's less fragile. But so in this instance, you did mention whether you thought that maybe GitHub wasn't working for prioritizing, and I think your assessment's probably right there. So my feeling on this one is that none of us really saw this as urgent as you did. We feel urgency in terms of what is breaking for us. Like, I'm currently fixing a bunch of Raspberry Pis because they're right in my face, and also get people pinging me about them. So that gives me that sense of urgency. GitHub prioritization is completely broken for me. My GitHub queue is just so massive I can't manage it anymore. So I'm wondering if people have suggestions for prioritization. I think that'd be a good discussion to have, and would probably be helpful here, because it sounds like if this is a major issue and it's been falling through the cracks, then yeah, we've got broken process that we need to deal with.
Right, and I think one natural prioritization is if somebody had said, well, I don't really know how to do this, but I'm trying to do it, can you help me? That shows an urgency, right? So
Miles, wouldn't something like infrastructure, I mean, if I understand this correctly, it's like, okay, well, infrastructure problem, you can't just send anybody at it. It's not like you can just throw it out there and be like, hey, anybody work on this? That seems to need a lot more specialization. There's a small set of people that can actually do anything about it.
Yeah, a lot of people do have the access to do this, though. There's a large number of people with access to all the machines that would need fixing. It's just a matter of, for those of us that would know how to do it in the first place, it's not a quick job. And then for other people, it's trying to figure out how to do it, like I think is the challenge. So it's not just there's a job I can do in 5 minutes. It's there's a job I have to, right, I got to drop everything and go and get my head into this thing. And yeah. And, I guess one of the ways that our system is broken is that to get attention in infrastructure, you have to be in someone's face. And that's not such a good thing. But I think that's where we've got to, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well,
I would say two things to add to it. Like, first, Rod, like, you expressed the sentiment that I very much feel too. It's like, you don't want to just be like launching all the Ansible scripts and relaunching all the boxes or spinning everything up. I do think that is like one part of it. And then the other part is the urgency. Like, I mean, to be honest, this is gone for 6 months partially because it isn't super urgent, even to me, right? Like, it's not the end of the world. It's annoying when Sitgim isn't green, but for the most part, we're only using it so much. But I do think that, like, this is something that should be to a certain extent prioritized. But like, this is a great example of one of those ones that's easy to lose track of because, I ping about it probably once a month every time I go through and do a release and get annoyed, and then I forget about it until the next time, it bothers me a month later. And that makes it really easy to just not get handled. I do think the GitHub boards are a way that we could explore that, where we could just make, a prioritization queue or something like that we could throw things into that could just act as kind of like a queue for the working group to go through. But I also do think that this raises questions like higher level questions about the agility of our current infrastructure setup. And what we could benefit from a higher level of investment in making our infrastructure more agile. And I apologize for all the buzzwords in there, but that's the best way I know how to describe it.
Okay, we do have a number of other issues on the agenda, so maybe we should move on. But I do agree that the sort of general, I know, Miles, you've had some proposals. I think it was you along those lines, so maybe we can cover it when we look back on those.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so the next issues are from Node.js Node. Now, looking at that list, since we do only have 14 minutes left, is there one which, does anybody want to suggest we talk about one in priority to the others?
What about the TSC, the expectations doc?
Sure, why don't we take a quick one on that? I updated yesterday. I think the main discussion point was, the current request was that we wait for discussion of the values. And I think I did comment yesterday saying, my impression based on what happened at the Collaborator Summit was that, that may actually be a pretty lengthy process. And
can somebody report on how that went at the Collaborator Summit?
What was done is everybody was sent off into different groups, given stickies. People wrote down the different values on the stickies. They went out onto then all those stickies were sort of grouped together on the wall. And that's as far as it went, right?
Whose hands is that in?
So right now, I think some of the key people who were handling like what had been taken there included like Sarah Novotny, our new board member, was active in that conversation, and Tracy Hines and Dan Shaw. A number of photos were taken of of the different values that had been surfaced. And I think the general hope was to do more of these in different areas. So, Rod, if you wanted to run one of these value workshops in Australia, that could be really awesome. Joyi, if you wanted to run it in China, that could be really good. I'm going to conferences in both South America and Japan in the next 2 months, and I was thinking about trying to run maybe something like this at NodeFest, if it's possible. We haven't had a larger coordination around next steps yet, but I do think, like, you know, that's part of the ongoing conversation that we'll be having in this meeting, and likely at the community committee as well, as my assumption.
Okay, so it sounds like somebody really needs to be a facilitator to pull that one together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we definitely need to make some clarity around next steps. I do think part of the assumption with was that this was going to be a multi-month effort towards getting towards a value doc that has had input from the variety of our community around the world. And that I'm imagining that since we just came out of Node Interactive and it's the beginning of the week and we're seeing it as a multi-month thing, no, we're just, you know, it's just a matter of probably like a couple weeks to figure out who the owners are.
So is the suggestion here that since that's going to take a while, that we shouldn't wait for that to land this, that we should try and land this?
That's my suggestion, in that I you know, I know it references the values, but I don't think it's, you know, are we going to substantially change that text if the value, you know, based on the values?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess the probably one of the concerns there is that if it's referencing something that doesn't exist, then, you know, if somebody wants to come and try and enforce this, then what are they referencing against, and do they either get too much leeway or not enough leeway in that? So I see.
Yeah, there. I guess I still look at it as it's better than not having it at all.
So my outstanding concern here that I don't think I actually expressed in that thread. So I know this comes from the board stuff, which I helped implement on the board level. I supported there, and I haven't actually looked at this latest revision, but it changes a bit. But the one of the things about the board thing was when you communicate publicly, you're supporting what the board has decided. Like, you know, even if you were a dissenting member, you know, you shut up and swallow it and just support the board. That's just how you do it. The difference that we have here is that almost all of our decisions are public. And so it's not like if you dissent, then it's not known that you don't dissent. But the bigger concern there is that if we, the kinds of decisions that we make on a technical level, particularly, we're not locking ourselves in the future. And so to be hypothetical, and this is a ridiculous example, but hypothetical. Let's say we decide to, as a TSC, we decide to remove all of the sync methods from FS because we say, okay, look, this is the wrong way to do Node. We're going to remove sync, and you just shouldn't use them. And so, okay, that's voted on, and it comes down and passes. And then, so as a TSC, okay, we all agree. That's just what we do. We go out there and support that. I may have dissented, but I support that decision. Does this document then would it hamper discussion in the future going forward on a topic like that? So, say somebody wants to argue that was the wrong decision and that we should walk back on that. In what ways might we be stifling that discussion? And it's wrong to kick up controversy about it and go out there and on social media and say, you know, I didn't support this and it was a terrible decision and I'm going to, you know, rah, rah, rah. But is there a potential for stifling discussion on decisions that we may have already made that some of us think need to be revisited in the future? That's the hypothetical that I'm thinking about here that I think is one of my remaining concerns here.
So I can speak directly to that, at least in my reading. And I think we can add more explicit language to that as well. I don't see that. I actually see that as being one of the major distinctions between this document and the board document. And I'm assuming part of that is fiduciary duty. But this document, I'm viewing it as it's basically saying that you should be respectful of the outcomes, but it's not saying that you can't be critical of them. That language was a little more explicit in an earlier edit, and it seems like the language has become a little more ambiguous. But at least the language that was more explicit in an earlier iteration was explicit about the fact that technical steering committee members are able to be critical of decisions as long as it's done in a respectful way and in in good faith. And the words I'm using right now are not necessarily the explicit language, so I may not be doing it justice. Just I'm trying to talk about the spirit.
There's two sentences there, really. It's when decisions are made within the established guidelines and policies of the project, those in leadership roles have a responsibility to uphold and respect the decision, even if they disagree with it. This is especially important in external communications, for example, social media, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the sentiment is right there. I think, and we have had cases of this before where we've made a decision as a group and members of our group have gone out there and diminished our group and our decision-making processes and said, I don't agree with it, on social media particularly, and that's been very unhelpful about particulars. But that I wonder if we could soften that language a bit more, because it's, you respect it, sure, even if you disagree with it, but or maybe it just needs an addition that any further engagement on particular issues where there's disagreement on a thing that's been taken should be done in a respectful and constructive manner. Because as long as you're doing that, it should be fine. Just don't go out there and
we could add a sentence which says something along the lines of, this is not intended to mean you can't reopen this discussion internally.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just that, that's, I guess, that's maybe an interpretation of respectable, but it's like, it doesn't mean we can't ever discuss this again. It's just like, don't go out and campaign against it in ways that try and circumvent or whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Aside from that, I think the sentiment here is good.
I was going to say, I don't even think that we should stifle people talking about it publicly if it's done in a respectful way. You can be unhappy about a decision, not be critical of it, and talk about the ways that we'll work forward on getting towards a mutually beneficial place. And I think at least to me, the spirit of it is mostly about just, if we're coming to decisions, to not undermine those decisions if you want to remain on the committees.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, it's, as long as you're not out there doing something that sort of says, okay, we made a decision, but we're acting in a way that says, maybe undermine is exactly the right word.
Like an example might be, we made some technical decision and it comes back to bite us, and then one of the TSC members out there going, I told you so, and making
right. That's not
that's not helpful.
No.
No, that's a great idea. Or if we land promise APIs and someone's like, oh, it looks like postmortem is screwed. That's very different than being like, you know what, promises has landed, and here are the things we're going to work on to improve postmortem analysis. Those are very, very different ways of approaching it.
Right. So I guess the initial question was because we can still, I think that sounds like there's some concrete suggestions we can make in the document, but the fundamental was can we get something like this landed without waiting several months for the values discussion to complete?
I'm personally okay with it. I do think we need to, get ComCom's take on it as well, as this will be a shared document.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, look, I'm mostly positive about this, so I'm not going to be a blocker. I'm just going to write some of my thoughts, what I've just said, into the issue itself. And then.
So, to anything about that, this is just very abstract, but I was thinking about Supreme Court and how they make a decision and they basically write up why they're for or against it, but then once it's done, it's just done. And so going back to the promise API thing, I could totally see myself writing. At the current time, I don't believe implementing a promise-only API is a good idea because we still lack the necessary means of doing proper post-mortem analysis. Basically, just getting out very clearly how I feel. But then after that, I don't I don't feel the need to pursue it because I've said exactly what I need to say. I don't need to beat a dead horse. Right. And from that point, yeah, there's more problems with it. And instead of continually reiterating the issues I've had, I'm going to try and solve those. Sorry, I haven't. It's 7 a.m. here, and I haven't slept all night. So sorry if I.
Yeah. No, but yeah. I mean, that's exactly what we're getting at. We're not all going to like all the decisions, but once we make a decision, we need to constructively work towards, how do we make the best of the decision we've made? Okay, so I think, yeah, I'll talk in we'll bring it up in ComCom as well, and with William in particular, just to see if, what people think in terms of should we try and push this to closure. And of course, if the values come in a form that we need to completely change it, we can do that. But I think otherwise, just letting it hang out there is not necessarily the best. So. Okay, we're down to, we're at time. Are there any other issues that people think we absolutely need to discuss in this meeting? Sounds like no, so let's just give people a few minutes to ask questions on the live stream or in IRC.
I think we might have finally got enough votes to deal with that readable stream issue, haven't we?
Yeah, I think that one's done, basically. Yeah, I read the last things that it was done, and it was only left on the agenda because I guess we can't take it off. So by next week, I assume it'll just be gone.
The other one that's interesting that stood out to me here was the was issue number 15324, which was the send 400 bad request on FileZero. If you haven't engaged with that one, that's actually really worth looking at because it's a breaking change, but it goes to this whole HTTP strict thing that we keep on running into. So go and read that one if you haven't already. And weigh in.
Okay. So I don't know, people monitoring the live stream, are there any questions there? I don't know, Matteo, if you have a way to check that. I don't think I see any comments in Node.dev.
In Node.dev, ref, I can make it clear that Matteo is responsible for breaking CI. I changed to readable stream. Node tester. Yeah, okay, I'm going to paste that into the conference chat just for interest.
Okay, but I don't see any questions there, so I think that's, unless there's any other business, we'll call it a meeting for today.
Okay, it's midnight here, so I should probably go to bed.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for everybody who came. Talk to you guys next time.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks.
Okay.